All right. Um, how snowed in are you right now? How bad is it?
Uh, it's like 6 inches, 6.5.
Oh, golly, y'all got 6.5.
Yeah, yeah,
So
we're snowed in.
we got 2.5 here, and it wasn't too bad. We got out and drove around on it last night, but some idiot came down our road with a snow plow. So now I've got like 4 inches at the end of my driveway instead of 2 inches. So trying to get out is a little more difficult than it was yesterday. So
Yeah.
um, we'll start kind of just with introducing you to everybody else. I know you and I have talked online for quite a while and gone back and forth just due to our shared association with Cowboy Jamboree and things like that. But I wanted to kind of let everybody else know who you are and what your background is in not just life, not just in writing, but kind of in life too. So tell everybody kind of about Justin Lee and how you came to be a writer and get involved in what we're involved in here.
Okay. Well, I guess the easiest way to start is I didn't really have any intentions of being a writer growing up. I didn't really read fiction until I was, I don't know, 25. I, besides stuff that was required in school, but
Yeah.
I read an interview one time with David Joy where he said that really you ain't gonna become a reader until you fall in love with the book. So, I just the Scarlet Letter and all the other stuff that they assigned just wasn't doing it for me. The only books that I remember reading that I liked back then was The Outsiders
Yeah.
and Of Mice and Men, both of them, which I still, reread those every now and then. I'm a big rereader, but I'm born and raised in East Tennessee. I used to be a prison guard at a maximum security prison for about 3.5 years now. I work at a tire plant.
Hmm.
But I started writing and really reading because I've always been a big movie guy, and I watched Gone Baby Gone, which is adaptation of a Dennis Lehane book, and I went and read the book. And I'm like, man, I really like this noir genre. So I looked up a list of noir titles, and The Devil All the Time and Where All Light Tends to Go by
Oh
David
yeah.
Joy
Yeah.
showed up on there. So I got those two. So I'm like, huh, they actually write stories set around like where I live. And man, I just fell in love with the devil all the time, which I fell in love with where all that tends to go too. But that Donald Ray Pollock book just, I don't know, did something to me. So, that made me a reader. So I started reading more and more fiction. And then that led to me discovering Raymond Carver.
Hmm.
And I read a story by him called The Bath. And I was just shocked by how much emotion and how much story he was telling with just the fewest of words. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
you just cut away all the fad. There was no purple prose, which I'm not dogging purple prose. If that's your thing, that's your thing. It's just that stuff tends to turn me off a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, after I read that, I'm like, well, I'm gonna give this writing thing a shot, and that was about a year and a half ago.
Really,
So I
that's
wrote.
short.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I've never been. Well, I have some college credits. I don't have an MFA or anything like that. I
Mhm.
just started writing, and I lucked up, and my first story that I finished, which is called Rotten Tree, got published. So I'm like, oh, this publishing thing's easy. And then my second story that I wrote uh, got rejected. So
They'll
I
come
got
back like a
humbled.
boomerang.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, it was a quick wake up call. I'm
yeah.
like, I don't know what all these people were talking about. I don't
Yeah.
understand that. And I
Yeah.
didn't think I was good or anything like that. I still don't. It's just, you know, I had one win. I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. I got it all figured out. And
I did the same thing. I wrote a little humor story. I mentioned it last podcast. It's called Michigan's for Lovers, and it was just about this really disastrous vacation we took to Michigan. And I sent it off, and they picked it up. They published it. And that was the first thing that I'd written that was like humorous. And I thought, man, I'm gonna be the next David Sedaris, like this thing. I'm like, this stuff's easy, And then like I got back to what I wrote, and golly, they were just boomerang stories. Just
Oh yeah,
God. I think that's the part people don't understand is like if you do hit one out of the park on the first one, the next ones are just like strike out, strike out, strike out. And that's part
yeah.
of it. Unfortunately, I read a really funny tweet earlier today. I don't know if you saw it. You were talking about you don't have an MFA or you weren't involved in any of that, but the MFA
No.
can be a brutal awakening too, kind of the same way. I think the tweet was I I think it's funny when people talk about birthing a story in a workshop and then you hold the baby up and everybody tells you how ugly it is, basically, and that's kind of what it is. Like you put your stuff out there and you love it and it is your baby, and then everybody else is like, yeah, I don't know what you're really going for here.
Yeah,
So yeah, it,
yeah.
it's
And figuring out what you're going for is the rough part. You
yeah,
know.
and it takes you a while. It takes you a while to kind of figure out what you want to write. Anyway, so you mentioned Joy and Pollock and Carver, like East Tennessee, like that's McCarthy territory over there. So like, what other guys have kind of, or guys or ladies or whoever has influenced your work?
Well, I mean, those two really, got me started.
Mhm.
But really, the three I'm on cheat. I'm gonna say four here
Oh, that's
lately.
fine. You can say as many as you want
Um,
to.
the biggie is Raymond Carver. I'd say he's probably all around my favorite rider.
Yeah,
Um, Willie Bloughton. Are you familiar with him at
yeah,
all?
yeah. Willie, yeah.
Lucia Berlin,
Hmm.
but she's a short story writer, and Kent Harrow. The guy who wrote Plain Song or Souls at Night.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're big influence. Which they're all their prose is like pretty stripped down, pretty sparse. It's I'm not big on labels or anything like that,
hmm,
but it
hmm,
gets labeled under dirty realism, so it's like kind of like
yeah,
grit lit.
yeah,
Which oddly enough, none of those are really Southern riders or Appalachian riders or anything like that. But I mean, to me, they talk about a lot of the same stuff and they communicate it the same way, you know?
yeah. So here's the thing, right? Like we travel a fair bit, go around, and like my wife likes to travel, and a lot of the places we've gone, you feel a kinship with some people, and some places you go, you don't feel anything. But when
Yeah.
we go to East Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, a place like that, that feels more like Arkansas than parts of Arkansas. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
Northwest Arkansas is a completely different planet than where I'm from. And that's the funny thing, and I may have mentioned this in the last pod. I don't know, but a lot of people when they think of Arkansas and Tennessee and place like that, they get that Beverly Hillbillies vibe. And look, where the hills are, where I'm from, is where the money's at. And
Yeah.
if you're going for that stereotype, you're going to miss a lot of what's going on here. And I just feel like the people that really feel like my people are the people from Appalachia more so than more southwestern riders or places that are closer to Arkansas. There's something there, or maybe it's because some of my people are from there and moved to Arkansas from that area that makes me feel that. But I mean, it came across to my wife too. That we sound the same. We say a lot of the same words and dialect, than other regions of the country. So I mean, we do share that. So I think I do connect more with Appalachian riders probably than the Mississippi riders. Which are just
Yeah.
right on my doorstep. So
Uh,
it's
I'm
it's
I'm 100% sorry if you hear my kids. I got a 2 and a 5 year old.
it's
So
fine. It's fine. It's fine. I think it'll let it out. I wouldn't worry about that at all. Life is what life is. So, what about you talk about having kids there, and I know that can be part of riding. So, what's your process? When and where do you ride?
see, that's another thing. It's kind of a long answer, I guess.
Oh, it's
But
fine. Yep.
at the beginning, like probably around a year ago, I took a writing workshop with Sheldon,
Yep.
and we talked about what your process is if you are part of the 5 o'clock Riders Club, and all that. And to be honest, I don't really have a process either. I just, whenever I get the time,
Yeah.
like sometimes I'm able to get up early and, write for a good solid 20, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. Sometimes as soon as I get up and sit in the chair, the kids wake up. So, so that's not
Yeah.
happening. A lot of my stories I wrote, like sitting at the, sitting at the table, helping them color. And then I get an idea and I just start writing it out. And then they come over there and try. They say they're going to write a story too, and they scribble stuff with crayon and all that. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's rough trying to carve out time, but I try my best
Yeah.
too. So,
I'm kind of the same way. I don't have a set routine. Like I do get up at 5 every morning, but it's not to write. It's more to just kind of settle my mind and get ready for the day. Writing kind of comes to me. We talked about this in school. They always talk about process, like you've got to have a process and you've got to dedicate a certain portion of your time to writing. And I don't disagree with that, but where I do disagree is I can't tell you when that time's going to be. You know,
yeah.
stories, even novels to a certain extent, come to me fully formed. Like I pretty well know where I'm going. I don't know the details, but I know how it's going to start and I know how it's going to end when I get it. And then I termed this, termed, coined a phrase in grad school called exorcism writing, where you've almost just got to sit down and get it all out just at once, especially with a short story. And that's kind of the same way we're writing a song too. Like if you sit down, the good work that I've done, whether it be a short story, a song, or a novel, has been something that I got out in a very short period of time. And then I
Yeah.
was able to go back and edit it and rewrite it if I needed to. But if it takes a long time, kind of found that it's not worth it. I got a novella and another novel that I just completely stopped working on just because I got out of the story and I never got back into it. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
short stories you can do that with, but a novel, I think once it's almost like those characters are dead, and you can't bring them back to
Yeah.
life.
They're goners.
And they're goners. So, yeah, I mean, it's difficult.
Yeah. I'm
So
which I'm a pantser.
yeah,
I guess if there's a phrase for it. Like I don't really have
yeah.
a plan or anything like that. I just sit down. What
I've
comes
got
out.
an yeah, I've got an outline, but the outline is basically just like chapter 1 this happens, right? And then the rest of it
Yeah.
is just pants
Oh yeah.
because like I said, I know where it's going, but I can't really tell you how it's going to get there. It's that Stephen King quote about, once you start writing, the characters will do what they want to,
Oh yeah.
which is
Yeah.
which is magic. That happens. And I think people don't really realize that when you start writing a story, that character is going to do an act like that character does and acts. Like all you're doing is just kind of watching. Do you do
Yeah.
this thing where when you're writing, you can see it in your head like a movie?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I try to.
Yeah.
And there's been times like you said, like I started out a story and I started out with a certain idea in mind, like okay, like I have a general idea of what happens.
Hmm.
So it's gonna start like this. And then by the time I write it, it's totally different. Not even remotely how I started it out. And like you said, you just kind of sit there and watch it happen, which I never believed. I just thought that, that was like something that people said.
No, it's a
But
thing.
yeah, it is a thing. And whenever it happens, it's weird. I mean, it's amazing sometimes. Sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know how to do anything else now. And, like I tried writing, like after, I had a couple of short stories get published, I'm like, well, I'm going to try writing a novel. Okay.
Hmm.
I'm going to try something longer.
Yeah.
And, no,
Really.
that did not pan out. Like I
I
wrote and rewrote
yeah.
nonstop. And I'm big on editing as I
Yeah.
go. Like
Yeah.
I can't, if I have to go back, it really takes the steam away from
Yeah.
me.
I find the novel easier. I don't know. Like I think a short story, I think you talked about Carver. I mean, you've got to get these things like so pristine and perfect that golly,
Yeah,
they take a lot out of you. But whereas with a novel, that's like a slow burn. You can work with it. You can finish it, and hell, you can go back and rewrite it if you want to. Like, I mean, you're not on any. And a lot of the times, you're trying to meet a deadline, or you're trying to write to a prompt or a theme, and that can be a lot of pressure. You know,
Oh yeah,
I did one here recently, and you're probably doing it too. The the CJ Press covers. Are you doing one for
yeah,
that? Yeah. So
yeah,
see, I sat down and picked one and then covered it. And that was easier because you are kind of going from a set template. So you're not trying to
yeah,
come up with everything all at once and then roll with it. But I find short stories intimidating. I don't know. I'd much rather
yeah.
work.
See, I have the hardest time stretching stuff out.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm. It's not like I'm some kind of like master short story writer or anything like
Mm,
that. But that's just the form that I have more success with. You know, which I'm
yeah.
working on a novella right now, and that's more my speed. You know, like even Willie Bloughton, he talks about how he writes his books to where like when somebody gets off a 12-hour shift, I want them to rather than sit on the couch and watch TV or play video games or whatever. I want them to be able to sit there and read a book. You know,
Yeah.
like I'm not big on wasted time. You know, 'cause I don't
Yeah.
have any. So
Yeah.
I assume
No,
no one else
none of
does
us.
either.
That's right. Well, and we talked about that. I mean, you want people to read, but you want them to be able to finish too. I mean,
Yeah.
a book, we said this the last time, a book that's over 280 pages is a lot of work for somebody these days because there's just so much stuff in the world that that just garners people's attention. Like people just they want to watch Netflix or they want to stream, sports or whatever they want to do. Like, and then your kids are there, and it's just pulling you in 100 different directions. The only time a lot of people get to read is like in bed at night,
Oh yeah.
and they've got 30 minutes before it puts them to sleep. No matter how good it is, a book's going to put you to sleep, and
Yeah.
you need to feel like you're making some progress with it, and feel like this isn't going to be a huge undertaking. Like I want to know these people. I want to get into the plot, and I want to understand how all this wraps up in a short amount of time. And I think if you can do that, that shows that you got more talent than somebody that drags it out for a week or writes a 1,200 page book. I've never understood
I,
that.
yeah, I mean, there's like I call them door stops. They're very
Yeah.
intimidating. You know, like
Yeah.
okay, Stephen King. You know, I
Hmm.
know you guys talked about him too.
Hmm.
For me, the shorter his stuff leans, the better it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Like
agree with that.
11/22/63.
Hmm.
There's parts of that book that's amazing. Some of the best
Hmm.
stuff he wrote. But then he stretches stuff to where
Yeah.
it lingers too long. Everybody
I
gets a backstory, and it's like a 1,200 page book.
I think the sweet spot's probably somewhere between 50 and 75,000. I think
Yeah,
I think any more than that, you're asking too
indulgent.
much of people today. Yeah, that too. There's a lot of wank involved in it. Like, I mean, if you're just like, look at the words I can use, sometimes that's too much, and that's coming from somebody that likes Faulkner. Like I can sit and read a Faulkner. I can read some of McCarthy's more florid stuff. Like that doesn't bother me because I feel like I've bought in, like I've got a grasp on what they're doing or what they're trying to do, and I don't feel like they're showing off. Whereas you
Right.
read some stuff today, and it's just like, well, let's pump all this in here that we can pump in here. Um,
Well,
but
I'll say that McCarthy, as far as like those writers that are more use more flowery
mhm.
language, his stuff is more palatable
Yeah,
for me.
no, I agree.
And like I said, I'm not dogging anybody that writes like that or likes reading that stuff because
Yeah.
who am I? I ain't gonna yuck
Mhm.
somebody's yum. But
Mhm.
as far as McCarthy goes, his stuff's sparse enough to where you you don't get super lost in the language. Like there's a barrier between the author and the reader. And whenever you start thinking about, oh, I bet he felt really clever sitting at a keyboard typing that out, then
Mhm.
that just takes me out of the story. you know.
Well, he wasn't afraid to use like archaic words either. Like some words you won't even know what they are. But I think that
Yeah,
his talent was he could give it to you in context where you kind of knew what he was talking about, whether you knew that word or not. Blood Meridian's full of that stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's accessible. I think there's a tendency these days to write inaccessible novels
yeah,
um, for for the average person. Now, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be florid prose and there shouldn't be big books and there shouldn't be books that cause you to think because I like those books too, but I want to know going in that that's what that book is. I don't want to sit down and read a crime or a thriller or a mystery book that's 1,200 pages long.
yeah. I
That I
mean,
think needs to go quicker, you know?
yeah, like I like a lot of I like a lot of nonfiction, and
Yeah.
those books are kind of doorstops sometimes.
Yeah.
Some of them,
But you know that going in, right?
yeah.
Like, I mean, I've got you mentioned that doorstops. I've got my computer sitting on the Grant book, the big Ulysses S. Grant book.
I was just thinking about that, but
That's what my computer's sitting on right now to get me at a good angle. But I mean, I've got two copies of that book. One is a school copy that I somehow ended up with at home, but I also have it myself. And I mean, that book, it's long. I mean, that's a long book,
yeah.
but it's so well written that it doesn't feel long. And
Oh
I
no,
feel like with nonfiction, you kind of know what you're getting going in. You've
yeah.
got to know all that stuff. So, what's the first thing you wrote that made you think I can do this?
Well, I'd have to say, Rotten Tree was the first short
Hmm.
story I wrote that got published. I'm like,
Hmm.
I got this. But like I said, that was immediately followed with rejection, rejection, rejection.
Yeah.
And I have a short story that is it's going to be coming out. I think in March is when they put the release date as. It's in that the motel anthology
Oh
from
yeah.
Cowboy Jamboree. And
Yeah.
that's to me that like figured out what my voice is.
Yeah.
If you believe in such a thing, that's the story that I'm most proud of. And if you want to talk about influences and inspirations, that's like that story came out of a line of dialogue from a movie that I was watching and a scene out of Better Call Saul. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
nothing like either one of those, but it's just like I read Jordan Harper's newsletter, I don't know, or Substack. I don't know if you do or not. It's
Hmm.
Welcome to the Hammer Party.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he's big on spirit boards, like stuff that captures the mood of what you're trying to write. That way, if you get a little lost on the path, you can go back to it and get back into it.
Yeah.
And those two things were pretty big. That, and I was reading and rereading a lot of Carver and Blount, and a lot of the favorites. But yeah, that story, I feel like I finally got in my groove.
I did a thing when I was writing my my first novel where I found that it was easier for me to write the characters if I had a sense of what they looked like. You're talking about your board.
Yeah,
So I went online and I just found some pictures of, celebrities or just normal people in the background or something and just cropped them to the point where I'm like, okay, that's what they look like. That's kind of now I can picture them more in my head. This is kind of their body and all that. And that helped me so much just knowing that, okay, she looks like this, he looks like that. This is what the town looks like because in reading your stuff, like all of it takes place is that a created county, Elam County that you've created?
yeah. It's just
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. So mine is too, but it's real.
Yeah, well,
Like the people in it are real people.
yeah,
But
the
I'm
places,
not
there's a
throwing
lot
them
of,
under the bus.
yeah, yeah, there's locations and stuff that's based off, like, I'm from Bledsoe County, or
Yeah.
that's where I live, and there's like restaurants, a gas station, and a motel. I kind of mix and match places
Hmm.
together. I
Hmm.
mean, it's based off the real. It ain't completely fiction,
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, I did a thing. So I did this thing where the town I grew up in doesn't go by the name that it was settled under. It was settled under a different name. So I just used the original name for the name of the town because unless you're from that town, you're not going to know that anyway. And then I just invented a name of a county, which got me around. I'm able to write about home in a way that I am, but I'm not. And it's kind of like at the beginning of a TV show, we've changed the names to protect the innocent. You can
Yeah.
base anything on anybody, but as long as it helps if you know who you're writing about, and that can
Oh,
kind of help you frame things. So we can talk about three of yours that I've read. We were lucky enough to be in the same issue in the spring when you did Good Time Charlie and Heartbreak Holly, right?
yeah,
Um,
Homewrecker Harley.
yeah, Homewrecker. I don't know why I said
Yeah.
Heartbreak. Homewrecker. Yeah. I've only read it 3 times today. Leave it to me to mess it up when we get here. So that tells me a lot about you, that story, because I used to be a musician and you get some of that stuff exactly right. Um,
I did too.
Yeah, so
So
you get it, right? Like there's
yeah,
always like, man, talk about protecting the innocent. There's always somebody in a band, and I got the sense these two guys were like high school band buddies, right? And they
yeah,
were trying to put something together, and we've all been there. And if you are the songwriter, there is always somebody in the band that thinks they're better than you are, and they want to like be the songwriter, right?
oh
And like you nail that so well that like here's this song, right? That and then just to have it like thieved away from you, like that would be like so infuriating,
yeah. I
and
mean,
then there you are at a reunion and it's like smeared in your face, that this is going on. And talk about that. That's Give me some of that background because I get that. I feel that deep inside my bones.
you still got a fire burning in there, don't you?
Well, I was the one that eventually said, you know what? If I'm writing these and I'm singing them, I don't need the rest of y'all anyway. So I just went and played solo by myself and just removed myself from the band part of it.
Oh yeah. Well, um, I will start off with saying that for the longest time, I really rebelled against like country music.
Hmm.
Just because it's kind of like books, I wasn't introduced to the rock stuff.
Hmm.
You know, so which I grew up listening to a lot of punk music and a lot of like I guess emo music.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
that stuff like the bands I played around in for a while, and then I started playing in it was a country band, but pretty much bro country.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I sat down and me and the singer and the guitar player was figuring out how to write a song because we had a big gig that we had, and me and the drummer wrote the majority of the song, and we neither one of us like country music, not the kind of country music we were playing. We weren't playing like sing stuff,
Hmm. Right.
like we were getting into like Jason Aldean territory, and I don't even like the guy, but I was buddies with everybody, so I'm like, and it's a gig. When
Yeah.
you're from a small
Yeah.
town, there ain't a lot of bands.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you
You
play
are the
where you
band
can.
half the time. Yeah.
And so we wrote this song, and it was country-ish, but it wasn't. Do you know a band called Lucero?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah,
Lucero
but you're Arkansas boy,
owns a
so
piece of my teenage heart. Yes.
yeah. Yeah, see, I was a late bloomer to them. I
Yeah.
didn't start listening to them until I graduated. And
Yeah.
me and the drummer were big Lucero guys, and
Yeah.
that band's mentioned in that story too.
Yeah.
But we wrote the most Lucero-esque song we could.
I've
And
been there.
everyone's like,
I've
man,
been there.
looking back, like you can just hear it.
Yeah.
And the singer wound up taking a lot of the credit for it,
Yeah.
just which we wound up breaking up a little bit later, but it's like Death of a Thousand Cuts,
Yeah.
it's just like that was the first one. No,
Have you ever met them? You ever met Lucero?
no,
Man, they're
I
the
probably
nicest. They are the nicest dudes. Like
really
they're exactly what you think they are. Like just absolutely just salt of the
that's
earth.
that's good to hear.
Yeah. I've seen them. Golly. at least 6 or 7 times. And
Jeez.
before they got super big, I'd seen them 2 or 3 times, and you could literally after the show just walk up and talk to them about anything you wanted to talk about. And I'm talking like early days when they were legless half the time, you know. I mean, they put on a show to where they were wore out at the end of it. Like Ben would just be like a ball of sweat, and it was just they were good
Yeah.
early. They lost me in the middle. They had
Oh,
a they had a middle period where they put the horns in and
yeah. They
a
tried
lot more
a
keyboards. Yeah,
lot of that Memphis sound.
yeah, yeah.
A
They
lot of
went for
songs.
that, and I don't know. So, golly, we could go for hours about Lucero, but I still got a
Hey,
piece.
I'm
They
here for it.
they
I'm here
still
for it.
they still got a piece of me. I think we're going to see them at the Rev Room in Little Rock coming up. I think in March. We just bought the tickets the other day, so
Lucky.
they're still good. They're still good.
Yeah.
Um, so so I mean that really foments the anger for the end of that story because I mean I do get that. Like I could see that unfolding in my mind. Like you're like Charlie just charging the stage and punching punching the
Yeah.
lead singer. Um,
And
but
I mean, you're from a small town too, right? Or
yeah,
smallish.
oh
I mean,
yeah, 600 people.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm about right there with you.
yeah,
Like I think if you count the entire county I'm from, like maybe 1,400 people,
yeah,
maybe. That's not just like the town part of town. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
um, God, we don't even have a red light.
No, we don't
So
either.
yeah, we're the
You
same, man.
and you probably got a loop that you drive.
Yeah,
There's 600 and the signs change now, but when I was growing up, there's 662 people in my hometown, and I think I was kin to 150 of them. I mean, everybody
yeah,
everybody in school is a cousin, a distant cousin or some way. And I don't mean that in the way that people are going to take that. I mean, that town was so small, everybody, it was settled by these families. Like these are the families that live here.
yeah. And they ain't coming off
And
that land either.
no,
You know,
no. And especially it's dirt farms, it's rice and soybeans, and that's $1 million land. Like these people are not going anywhere, you know.
yeah,
So it's it's a lot the same. The thing that killed my hometown was they closed the school, and we don't get a lot of new blood in there now because of that. But
no,
when it had a school and things were we had industry there, it was better than it is now. Now it's kind of like I don't feel like it's home when I go back now. It looks a little different. You know,
yeah.
it
Hey,
is
I'm
what
with
it
you.
is. Yeah,
But you know, then the feeling of kind of feeling like you get left behind, like you see other people moving on to
yeah,
greater things, and there for a while, I kind of felt like that, because where I'm from, you either work at the prison, which it's a
hmm
state job, you get good benefits and everything, or you drive 3 counties over and get a job at the tire plant.
hmm
So
hmm
I'm went straight from high school to the prison
yeah.
and
That's a eye
worked
opener.
there. Yeah, I worked with people who've been there for 20 years, and that's the only job around.
Yeah,
And you see like some of your friends move to Nashville and things, and you just didn't have the means to do it, and you just had to get a job.
yeah,
I came from a lower middle class family. Like my dad was a coal miner whenever there was a strip mine not too far from here, and they closed it down. He worked construction. My mom built lawnmower engines until I
yeah,
was about out of high school. So, I didn't have my mom and dad wasn't about to put me up in Nashville to try to make it, and
yeah,
I didn't have it in me to be a starving artist or or
yeah.
anything like that.
Man, I was an idiot twice. I mean, I've thrown away high school scholarship, college scholarship. I mean, I think life comes to you when it's coming to you. And I think
Yeah,
looking back, I think to ask a kid at 17, 18 years old, you know, figure out what you're going to do with your life and then do this for 4 years. And then when you get out, you'll have a career. That's a tough ask on somebody at 17, 18 years old. Cause I didn't figure out who I wanted to be until I was, golly, almost 30, and by
yeah,
then you've made so many mistakes that you've got to go back and kind of correct all that to get to a point to where you feel like, I'm on that path. But, eventually you get through school and you get through, everything you want to get through, and things start to click. But man, that early adulthood can be tough. And I envy folks that write from that point. Like they've had all this time to figure out who they are. So I envy that. But then on the other hand, I think, well, what about the folks like us that picked it up a little later in life and are having success? I mean, that to me is almost more impressive than somebody that's trained since day dot and gone through degree after degree to figure it out. So, and
Yeah.
some of those people, I'm sure you've seen them online. You'll read their tweets or you'll see Instagram posts or whatever, just to people like, oh, it's so hard to write, like the writing process. Oh, like, yeah, it's hard, but shit, pull yourself up and let's go. Like
Yeah.
are you going to whine? I think more people whine than they write. I think that's become a
Ain't
cool
that the
thing
truth?
to whine
Yeah.
instead of write. Um,
Yeah. Which I
ma-
mean, that's why you got to really work at it.
yeah, because if
Especially
you're not writing, you're not getting any better at it. So why
no.
complain? Just sit down and write anything just to get
Yeah,
better.
and everybody writes garbage.
Oh yeah,
Like they have garbage that no one is ever gonna see but them.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
mean that is how you get better. You gotta suck it up, and then
I am
you
sure.
write a good.
Yeah, I said this to Sheldon the other day. Toni Morrison and George Saunders have got some just ugly stories somewhere that will never see the light of day.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like
I mean,
nobody is that brilliant that everything they write goes out. I mean,
yeah.
I've heard Saunders say before that he's got some stuff um, that he's just got some he's never gone back to. One
Oh yeah,
he was on a podcast the other day talking about that. But yeah, it is hard to to know where you're going that young, and especially as a writer, your early stories are trash, like you say, and it's just getting the chops, putting in the time. It's a lot like music, right? Like if
yeah.
you're going to be tight, you've got to practice, 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 and I think
Oh yeah.
that's
I
the
mean, we
key.
whenever I played, like the country band is the one that we had the most success with,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
we pretty much lived together
Yeah,
for months. I
yeah,
mean, the majority of the time that we played together, we all lived in the drummer's basement, pretty
yeah.
much.
We
And
would
it's just
practice in my parents' shop. And I guess not I guess, I know when we got too loud, the cops would come, but they would never interrupt us while we were practicing. They would let us finish the song and then they'd be like, you're going to turn it down.
yeah,
So I was like, well, if we got the cops listening, it can't be all that bad. So
yeah. We got somebody.
we got somebody. Yeah. So you talked about Rotten Tree earlier, and
Yeah.
that's a dark story with an O. Henry twist, kinda at the end of it. You want to tell me a little bit about what you were thinking about when you wrote that and how that story came to be?
Well, I'm trying to think of the best way of wording this because I do have to, edit myself a little bit.
Yeah,
Are you familiar with Lucia Berlin at all?
vaguely, not enough to
With
where I could talk, in depth.
she's she's not like the only author that does this, but a lot of her stuff is like I guess what they call auto fiction,
Yeah.
where it's like based off her life, but she fictionalizes
Mhm.
it, to a certain point. Sometimes she doesn't, it'll be like her character's name will be Lucia, and that story, not obviously it didn't happen. I didn't kill my dad, but there was uh there was an incident where
Dads tend to have some really gruesome endings in your stories.
oh man, yeah, dad. Well, you know how you talk about that exorcism writing,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm really I did not have the greatest of childhoods.
Mhm.
Um, I have two sons, so fatherhood scares me. And like most dads, you want to get it right, and there's certain aspects where you feel like you're gonna mess it up. And that story, dads have a tough break in my stories. It just comes out like that. But that story is based on an incident where my dad killed some rabbits with a hammer
Oh yeah.
whenever I was, like 5, and it just kind of took shape from there. And I sat down and started writing it, and I did not. Sorry if I'm being very open here,
No, that's fine.
but I didn't really. fit in with a lot of the crowd here. Like I didn't grow up hunting really. Like my dad brought me, but I didn't really like it. I didn't like working on cars. The stuff that is stereotypically what people are into around here, which is also in a lot of ways not true because like you mentioned Winter's Bone on your last episode,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
you know, uh, Ree's friend that she goes to see. I can't remember the character's name, but she tries to borrow her boyfriend's truck, and they're like
Oh, yeah.
listening to really heavy metal and everything. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
more accurate than most stuff I read or see in Appalachian set films.
Mhm.
Like that's more true, and that's like in the Ozarks, but that's
Yeah.
more relative to my upbringing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that story just poured out at me, man. I just thought about that, and you hear stories about other kids' dads, and they're trying to toughen them up and make a man out of them, and I just thought about the most extreme version of that,
Yeah.
and
I
well, to me, the most extreme.
My whole first novel is about dad issues. I mean, not that I have any. I mean, my dad's dead now, but we weren't close really. I mean, but he was a good dad. I mean, he's just a quiet man. You didn't really know a lot about him. I mean, he just
So,
there are areas of my dad's life that I'll never know anything about. You know,
right,
I know what I had with him, but he was in no way an influence on that story. I say that just to kind of touch base with you there because I can get that. But that my book is very much about a son that feels like he doesn't fit with the rest of the family, right? Like he was good at basketball, he was a musician. His dad told him that those weren't things you do around here, like that's soft, like we need you to do this so that you can be a part of the family and you need to do that. And he makes a decision to say screw all that and he enlists in the army and goes to Vietnam, just to prove a point. And the whole of that book really is about him trying to, in some way, even though he doesn't care, to live up to his father's vision of what he should be, you know.
yeah,
Um, and there is a lot of that. And I can relate to that rabbit and hammer story too, because my story with that is we were fishing and we'd caught some catfish and he was banging them on the head with a hammer. And I was like, Papa,
yeah.
why don't you just cut their throat? Like I was like, just why are you hitting them on the head with a hammer?
Oh
They
yeah,
brought
which
that
and
they brought
that's
that
the
up
old
at
timers
Christmas.
way, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I mean, that's just how you did things, and because he was a hard man. I mean, he'd work till he couldn't work. But yeah, that's just the way things were. Um, so let's move to burnt then because burnt kind of alludes to dads again because you burnt one up on the other side of a mountain. And that's a story which is a little and it kind of goes with your winter's bone, right? Because I mean this is a story about methamphetamine. I mean,
Yeah.
really. And I don't know what it's like in East Tennessee, but around here it is the drug of choice. And you see people do some crazy things. So
Oh yeah. I
talk
mean,
about talk about burnt for a moment.
it's well, Burnt came about because I was in Sheldon's workshop that I took. I actually wrote that in
Hmm.
there, and he decided to publish it. But like you said, methamphetamine was a drug of choice around here for a long time, which now it's moved on to like fentanyl and
Yeah.
heroin, stuff like that. 'Cause, I mean, you can go to certain parking lots and see, used syringes laying around.
Hmm.
But it's ravaged around here. And I had a family member who, in that story, I mentioned what's called smurfing, which
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's you get people to go around and buy Sudafed from a
Okay.
different place, much different, stores and everything. That way, you're not going to one town and buying a bunch of Sudafed in one place and then getting on everybody's radar. You just get people to do it in
Yeah.
surrounding areas. That's what they call it here, smurfing. He
Okay.
uh he got arrested for that, and that kind of started that whole story.
Yeah. That is, it's a short story, but there's so much in it. Like you get, and I love the way it ends. Right? Like I'm just tired. Like I
Yeah.
mean that you can almost see somebody saying that.
Well,
And
and that part, like I said, I worked at a prison for a long
mhm,
time,
Mhm.
well, a long time for me, you know. Um, I'm not that type of guy. I learned that in there.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
not the correctional officer type,
Yeah.
but a lot of the guys that were in there, and it's not all because I refuse to believe that like there's good and bad people just straight up. There's mostly gray, and there was a drug program there that some of the inmates could take if they wanted to, and there was one guy who I mean, he's a nice guy, but you could just tell, like even in prison, they're able to get drugs and cell phones, all the stuff they're not allowed to have. People bring it into them, and one time me and him just got to talking, and he was just telling me his story and how he got in there, and you could just tell from looking at him that he was tired. Like he just said that he was exhausted of prison, exhausted living the way he was. So he wanted to get better, and then he did get better for a while, and then he just slid right
Mhm.
back. And my family member is the same way. If you just look at him, he's just dog tired. Because in between jail and running around trying to get the things that he needs to get by, it's a hard life. You know.
How much did you pull from that experience, just being in a jail? Does it help? Does it
Uh,
hurt?
it helps. I mean, just because you learn a lot about people. You
Yeah.
learn a lot about how desperate people can get and what that leads to. You can learn also about how. Am I allowed to cuss on this?
Oh yeah. Fuck yeah.
You can. you you learn about how big of assholes people can be just to be
Yeah.
assholes, and
Yeah.
a lot of those assholes have backstories where you're like, oh, okay, well, I see how he turned into that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do pull from that a lot because like it's the old adage, desperate people do desperate things. That's
Yeah.
like what a lot of our fiction is based on.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
hard truth. And at the same time, you see how much the system doesn't work.
Mhm.
Like the correction system does not does not work.
Well, my wife works in it. She's a circuit clerk here for the county, so we see all that stuff come through the courts. And the thing that I get out of it is stories, like, and there's some stuff that comes through there, and I'm like, God, I'd like to write a story about that. And she's like, well, you can't because it hasn't been adjudicated yet, you know. So it
Yeah.
is like you say, it's just amazing some of the stuff that you hear that you hate to use normal because normal's not a good word to use for it because those people are normal too. But run of the mill folks would never go to the lengths that some of these people go to make ends meet. And that's just a different world to the world that we're living in. Um,
Oh yeah.
and it just blows your mind all the time. What you see, what you hear, kind of the desperation, like you say, because that does inform a lot of what I'm writing about. And not the second book. I like my second book is not so much a straight gritty piece like my short stuff is, but it's still got those elements. And I think that I see that all through your work and the people that we, travel in the same circle with online and talk to. We seem to be drawn to the same stuff. And I think that's because there is you use the term dirty realism. I think the realism's the key part to it. I mean, there's that. I think that's what people want to read. They want to read real life stories, and that's not knocking fantasy at all or science fiction. I mean, some people love those things, but
I
I,
got nothing but respect for people who can do it.
yeah,
you
I
know.
just, I just, that's not me. I mean, I love Vonnegut. Like I can read that,
Yeah.
but The Hobbit, things like that. But I mean, I cannot get into like super high fantasy or sci-fi. I just need to. I'll tell you a funny story, and this is hilarious. When I was in grad school, I went to Mississippi State, and I was doing a history degree, and I wanted to. I wanted to write about the history of rice in Arkansas. It was ag history, which on itself doesn't even sound exciting.
Well,
But
I don't know. I'm
I was
interested in
I
it.
was I
So
was convinced I could make it interesting. And after a semester, I was so bored, and I'll tell you why. I missed people because all I'd read about was rice. All I'd read about was rice production, and the story I wanted to tell was the story of the people that brought it. I wanted to focus more on the people than I wanted to focus on the agricultural history side of it, and I could have done
Yeah.
that. I could have done it. I could have written a book about, you know, the people that brought rice to Arkansas that needs to be, it still needs to be written. But I just miss people too damn much and lost that passion. I think they say all things happen for a reason. I think that's kind of what pushed me over into, well, let's write about people. Let's write stories about, maybe you can use that in your book, or something.
Yeah.
And it's been handy because a lot of the stuff that you've written, you've got those elements of authenticity in there, like in Good Time Charlie, right? Like you got all that band stuff right, you got all that meth stuff right in Burnt, like you got all those things right. And if you don't experience those things, like if I wouldn't have had that background in rice, I couldn't have written about um, the portions of that are in my novel, right? So it all does happen for a reason. It's just getting it all to marry up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And whenever certain ththings about, it can be random topics or
yeah.
lifestyles, or like you and Sheldon talk about life around here. Whenever you read a book by somebody and you can just tell that they're painting everybody by the same with the same brush,
That
it's
burns me up. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I can't stand that.
It's the lazy way to go about
Yeah,
it. I
it's easy
I
to
yeah,
say
and
everybody's the same way.
I've thought so much about his anecdote about the chalk, and the conveyor belt.
Yeah.
Um, because nobody would think about getting that right, but the people that are listening, or the people that are reading, are reading and looking for the details that matter. And if you do screw that up, you lose some credibility, and you got to keep credibility with your reader, or they're going to stop reading.
Oh
Um,
yeah, like prison stories.
yeah,
I can't even sit and like watch a movie set in a prison without like looking for a little.
yeah,
I'll nitpick it to death, and it's unintentional. Like I'll go with the story.
yeah.
Like, whatever the
It
premise
ruins you.
is, it
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
But it does just ruin it. And there's a book called Barker House, and that's the best prison. It's a collection of short stories. It's kind of like
Mhm.
the things they carried. They're all interconnected. It's one book,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there's a bunch of different characters. That you want the best prison book. That's the best one I've
And what was the
read
name of
about
that
getting
book again?
Barker House.
Barger House. Okay.
Yeah,
I
it's
did. Go ahead. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say it's told mostly from the correctional officer's
Hmm.
viewpoint, and that is a viewpoint that is not explored a lot.
That's a unique way to look at it for sure.
Yeah,
I did. I mean, in college, I worked in a restaurant, same restaurant, pretty much the whole time, and I would watch TV shows. I'm like, that's not how you do that. That's not
yeah.
how that's done. Until The Bear came out on Hulu.
Oh
Man,
yeah,
The Bear nails the restaurant. Like whoever wrote that show has worked in a restaurant and been in the shit before. Like they know, they know what they're doing. And
that just seems like the most stressful job.
oh, dude, it's awful. It's awful. And people want to send. Ours was a steakhouse, and they would send stuff back, and you would just want to kill them. I'm like, you order it medium rare, and we send it out there, and it's perfect, and they tell you it's underdone. Like, or if somebody orders it well done, you just want to throw it in the trash. Like, it's just
Yeah, might as
it can
well.
be. Yeah, it's just leather. It's just a boot. Um,
Yeah,
anyway, let's talk about what you got coming up. So you got Out There in the Dark, which is a novella. Tell us a little
yeah.
bit about that. Kind of you don't have to tell us everything because we don't want to ruin it, but give us kind of the 10,000-foot view elevator pitch of what Out There in the Dark is.
Well, right now I'm about halfway through, give or take. Depending on if I'm able to make it through and not scrap the whole thing again.
Hmm.
But this is that novel that I started writing that didn't pan out, and I started out trying to be a certain kind of writer, writing a certain kind of stories, and I could just tell that it was like I was, like you and Sheldon said, covering
Yeah.
all these other writers, which I think everybody does when they're first starting out. You write what you know, write what you love, and I was just taking the wrong viewpoint with it. I was thinking about it all wrong. So the story is about a father and a son. So, but this father, I ain't gonna say how it ends, but it's not like my other
Okay.
story.
He's gonna
But
live, everybody. He's gonna live.
yeah, he's he's a single father. He's raising his son. He's the owner of a gas station slash diner. I mean, you're from a small town, you know those are
Yep.
everywhere.
Yep.
And his son gets in a brawl with a off-duty cop, and it just goes around the events circling that. It's over his son's girlfriend, and this is some more of that, I guess, auto fiction, kind of, because there was a similar incident that happened where me and a group of friends went to the it's called the city park, but it's the park that's in town, and
Yeah.
the gate was left open, and there was two vehicles parked there, and one of them looked like our buddy's truck, so we moved it, and it turns out that it was an off-duty cop that was in the woods with a minor,
Oh.
and it turned into he chased us with a gun. Long story short, turned into a big county affair, and that's kind of what the story's about.
Golly, that sounds good. I mean, it's always a funny stuff you do when you're kids that can like just open a can of worms like you
Oh
would
yeah,
never believe. We
I
nothing.
we would never would have thought
Yeah.
that was going to turn into that.
We we were on a street well, in a small town you've got corners that are wooded, right? Like and it can be
Yeah,
a blind corner, a blind wooded corner. And they had outlawed eggs on Halloween pretty much in our town a long time ago. Um,
outlawed egg.
yeah, you couldn't throw eggs at cars or anything
Oh
like
yeah,
you
yeah.
could not buy eggs almost like the week of Halloween. Like if you were a
You're
minor,
going to
like
start
you couldn't.
IDing them.
They were not selling eggs to minors in my town, guaranteed. And for years that's what you did. You just like egg cars and threw biscuits at cars or whatever. And we decided we were going to have a bunking party, I guess, and we went over to my buddy's house and we stayed there. And his dad came in at about dark with 3 dozen eggs and like 6 things of biscuits. He's like, "You boys
Oh
go have a
no.
good time, right?" So we went down to this little wooded corner and we made mischief. And I I was done. Like there wasn't anybody out, and for some reason, one of our friends jumped out and hit this what I will call a redneck tank. It was jacked up, like it had Confederate license plates, like it was more rust than it was anything. And man, he nails this thing. And I thought, oh shit. So I ran
Yeah, that's the wrong
deeper,
one, man.
yeah, deeper into these woods. Well, he split. Like he just like took off down the road. And this guy gets out of the truck with an axe handle and comes into the woods. Man, I'm like laying down behind a tree. I was scared to death. And there was this kid with us who was not part of our group that he'd ran the other direction. And
Yeah,
the guy was like, "Who threw that at me? Who threw that at me?" And anyway, I threw the other kid under the bus and pointed the other direction. And I think he went off chasing him. There was no way he was going to catch that guy.
right.
But just smart asses, he
Oh
told
yeah,
us, he's like, "You boys know what this is?" I'm like, "It looks like axe handle to me." He's like, "Yeah." He said, "You know what it'd do to you?" And I went, "Damage, probably." Yeah. you know. Anyway, he's like, "Yeah, watch this." And this is the funniest part of this whole story. I'll never forget this as long as I live. He said, "Yeah, watch this." And he slammed that axe handle up against a sapling right there and split the axe handle, not the sapling. And I was just thinking to myself, man, you better get a bigger handle.
okay. I
Anyway,
could have took the risk. Could have took the
yeah,
hit.
yeah, I could have took that. It would have gave. But anyway, he took off after the other kid, and we got out of that. But there's no way you catch him. That other kid could run like nobody's business. But
Oh yeah, yeah. What's
it
weird is
just
that's
yeah, go ahead.
exactly kind of what happened
Yeah,
in our little problem. As soon as that happened, we moved the truck by hand. We moved it like I don't know, maybe a foot, maybe.
yeah,
And because I mean, you're stupid. It's a truck. You ain't gonna pick it up and move it.
yeah.
And we're getting back in our truck, and we hear somebody yelling, and we like stop and look around, and the guy that was in front of me getting in the truck is gone. Like you just see him take off running through the woods. He's
He's
got a
just
white shirt
dust.
on.
He's just gone.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it was like Roadrunner pretty much.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, who's yelling? And then I see somebody with a flashlight running through the woods. So like I jump in. It was five of us, but my cousin was driving. He jumps in, gets behind the wheel, and the other two get in the bed of the truck. And it was like out of a movie. Like the truck wouldn't start. It's the only time it's never not
Never
started.
did.
and
Yeah.
and as soon as that guy came running up, he had his gun out, and
Yeah.
one of my buddies jumped out of the back with an axe handle, and
Oh,
which
mercy.
I ain't gonna get into all the particulars, but
Yeah.
nothing happened,
Yeah. Yeah.
thankfully. Which my buddy who ran off came back because he thought that it was our buddy that was just really, pissed off.
Yeah.
And no, it was not him. But
I can tell you that 6 high school boys can lift a Volkswagen Beetle off railroad tracks with a train coming. I do know that to be a fact.
proper motivation.
That's right. And no, I was sitting there like, just leave it, let insurance pay for it. But
They'll cover this, man. They'll cover it.
yeah. All right.
When's
So we're
have you heard anything about when your book's coming out?
2025.
Congratulations on that, by the
Thank you,
way.
sir. Appreciate that. 2025. And it's so funny. Um, I had shopped that book. So that book I had written, the first draft written when I got in my MFA program and workshopped it all through the program. And it was going to be my thesis from the time I started. And when it got finished, I'd got nothing but positive feedback on it. I'd sent it to ex professors. I'd sent it to uh, beta readers. I'd Eli Craner had read a page or two of it and sent me an encouraging email back. Um, and just I felt good about it. I didn't feel like there was much wrong with it. But you want to talk about boomerangs and stuff like that.
No,
The the
no.
the most disheartening thing you'll ever do is one, try to get an agent, and then two, try to sell a book. Because, and I mentioned Ron Rash in that last podcast. This is one of the things he told me because I asked him about how do you get an agent, and he said, "Well, Dan," he said, "you get one when you're not looking for one." And
Man,
he put a book out that got some good reviews and got an agent after that. Um, but it got to the point to where I was worried. I knew that it was good. I knew that everything married up. I knew that the plot made sense and it had a really, really good ending. And I'm lucky enough that my wife reads a lot of books and she will not bullshit me if something's not good. And she'd read it and everybody's wife's going to tell you it's good, but I can tell when that's crap. You know, like I knew that
yeah,
she thought it was good. I'd had 2, 3 other people read it, and it just that book was done. I wasn't going to do anything else to it. So, you get rejections from everything to, I see that this is 50,000 words. We wish that you would do that. Well, I mean, that just tells you they didn't read it. Like if they're going on
looked at the
word
word
count
count.
alone, yeah. And I got quite a few with personalized messages. I got 5 or 6 that had a personalized message, which is always good, even though it's a no. If they write something, that's good. Um, but I had given up on it. I was actually thinking about going into the second one and just finishing it off. I'm on the last chapter of that. And Adam said he'd read it. He said his to be read pile was high, but he would read it. And I didn't know how long that was. Didn't know when that was going to happen. Um, so I just thought, well, he'll read it, and when he gets to it, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I'll keep submitting to other folks, and I had sent it to a place in Texas that was kind of excited about it, but they were more focused on fantasy, and it would have been one of their first, literary fiction publications. And
Yeah,
a girl that I was in school with started that press, so she had read it and was excited about it. And yeah, I was either going to do that or I was going to start my own publishing house because I felt like it needed to be out there, and I don't want to sound like a prima donna. Like my stuff's good and it needs to be there, but you've heard my theory on the music industry and publishing too. Like I do think that those two things are going to meet at some point. Like publishing is going to become like that because the big five is so hard to crack. Um,
And people I feel like are growing more and more tired of the big five. It's,
Yeah, we're at
you
a
know,
Britney Spears in sync moment with this, where
not
everything
not
is
what I
the
was expecting.
same, you know. But you understand that, like we're at. Well,
Yeah.
let me reframe it. We're at the Nirvana moment with publishing.
Oh,
You see what I mean?
Nirvana Bush
Like,
moment. Okay.
yeah, because you got everything is the same. Like, I'm not saying it's all bad, but everything is in the same vein, and there's got to be a disrupting force, to come through there. And I said in the tweet when Cowboy Jamboree picked it up that I had always thought that would be its home. But my thing there was the submission guidelines say they consider books by people that they published, right?
Yeah.
So I'd only gotten that published in the spring. So, you know, I sent it off early summer, midsummer, and Adam said there's a few editorial things he wants to do with it, but other than that, it's good. And that was the way I felt about it. And yeah, that's kind of where I wanted it to be in the first place. I'm kind of an indie
Cowboy
guy.
Jamboree is just where it's at. Like
Oh,
I like indie books, indie music, but they put out some of the best work.
yeah, I agree with that. I was super
I ain't
happy
just
to
saying that
be.
just because we have stories and a book
Yeah,
with you. It's
yeah,
just, like Sheldon, I know he said that he's probably the most overlooked, underrated, unsung Appalachian writer. In a lot of ways, he is because he's not talked about near enough.
mhm,
And I'm pretty damn proud that Cowboy Jamboree sticks by him and puts
yeah.
out all this stuff.
Well, and it makes me feel good to be a part of that. I mean, the
Good
all of his
company.
work, yeah, he was so, full disclosure, Sheldon was pretty well my thesis advisor in grad school. So I mean, he's seen this book through start to finish, and when he's telling you he believes in it and then you submit it, like I always held out hope that it was going to get picked up there. So uh, yeah, super excited. The worst part about it is you got to wait a year, and then when
Oh yeah,
the year's up, you'll have it in your hands. But yeah, it's exciting. It's a little kind of takes the pressure off a little bit. You feel like because with an MFA, a lot of the things that I mean, you can teach, but a lot of your requirements for jobs are you need to have a book published, to get a job at a university or a small college, and um, it certainly helps. Um, and I think it kind of makes it easier because now you know what's out there. You know what you're going to have to go through with the second one, because the
yeah,
short story world and the novel world are two completely different animals. Um, as far as the way that, or as the way I think that they work. So, but yeah, it's exciting, and that
yeah. I'm
novella
excited
will
to read it, man.
that out there in the dark will probably find a home there as well. I hope, because you do review
Fingers
books, you
crossed.
can certainly review it when it comes out.
Hey, I'm all for it. You send it my way, man. I'll
Yeah.
read it.
So we've been here an hour, so I'm going to ask you the famous last question, right? So who are you having for dinner, living or dead, and what are you going to serve?
I knew you were gonna ask this, and I still didn't prepare for it.
It's tough.
Um, all right. Well, there's no way I'd pass up not inviting Carver.
hmm
So Carver's there
He won't say
and
much.
Blount. He won't say much, but what he says counts. So
That's
damn it.
right. That's right. That's right.
um, Definitely Willie. Willie will
hmm
be there, and probably Lucia if I had to pick a third. And I try my hand at some eggs, bacon, and some home fries. Man,
There you go. You
uh,
can't
they're
fail
the
with
diner
breakfast.
type,
Yeah.
and breakfast.
Yeah. There's sometimes I don't know if people around the country do this. I'm sure they do. I'm probably going down some regionalist wormhole, but God, breakfast for supper is not bad. I
That's
mean, you
the
got to
best
go for
supper.
that.
You
Yeah, it's
know,
got to be. It's got to be. I
get
think
some
well,
chocolate gravy in there.
yeah, yeah, or
Yeah,
red eye gravy, whatever you want to do.
yeah.
We always had my grandma would do just buttermilk gravy. I went to a place the other day and they said sausage gravy, and I thought, well, that'll be good. There was more sausage in there than there was gravy.
Yeah,
So,
gravy's such a thing. It's hard to get right.
you know, you don't turn it into spackle. That's the worst
Yeah,
part.
and it never beats grandma's. You
That's
know.
right. That's right. It's gotta have pieces of the iron skillet in it to be good.
Yeah.
And my iron count will never be low.
Yeah.
Oh,
She's looking out for you, man.
that's it. Always is. Always is. All right, brother. Well, thanks for being here. I don't want to keep you much longer. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me, man. I really dig
Yeah.
what you're doing.
And you too. I
Look forward
appreciate
to the
what
next
you're
one.
doing. You bet. And we'll have I released one today. There's like a 1.5 episode where I'll talk about the books that you mentioned and kind of let people know what you dig and what you're into. And we'll talk about what you got coming up. I'll suggest the websites where your work is, where they can find you. And you can tell them how they can get in touch with you. That's at Twitter, right?
Yeah, that's mostly what I use, man. Is
Yeah.
Twitter.
And it's at that Justin Lee. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, you got
Yeah.
it.
All right, brother. Well, go enjoy. I think you said you're having tacos. Go enjoy the rest of your tacos and play with them little ones.
Oh, I hear him running. So,
All
all
right, man. It's good to see you.
right, good to see you.
All right.
Take it easy, man. Thanks
Appreciate you
again.
doing this. Uh huh. All right. Bye bye.